Hey my content connoisseurs, it's Cody, and I'd like to welcome you to the first ever episode of Press Play Reviews, where today we'll be talking about the first 3 episodes of The Mandalorian. With 3 weeks down and 3 episodes under our belt, we've got a lot of content to cover in a short amount of time, so let's dive on in. So, The Mandalorian. 3 episodes down, 3 weeks, and a lot more to go. It's going to be fantastic. There's so much cool stuff that they can work with in the Star Wars Expanded Universe, with a lot of stuff that they've recently done under The Last Jedi, The Force Awakens, Rogue One, and even the recent Han Solo movie. A lot of people haven't taken well to a lot of the new Disney Canon Star Wars. You know, the comics in the Expanded Universe and the recent Jedi Fallen Order and a lot of these other materials in the new expanded universe have been really well received, just not so much in the mainstream media that most fans of Star Wars are going to be familiar with. But with Jon Favreau in The Mandalorian as its writer and director, we get to see a lot of familiar works with him and the Disney cast that he's done before, as he has had a lot of prior work in the MCU, and just having that the big chopping block under his belt with the MCU, and a lot of great tier list actors and stuff. We get to see what he can do with a lot of unfamiliar faces, with like Carl Weathers returning. We get to see Nick Nolte return as Kuiil, the Ugnaught, the little pig guy. He's really cool. I like him. We get to see some kind of familiar background stuff and other stuff that's worked really well with the MCU before, like Taika Waititi has some involvement with this. We get a really great score from Ludwig Göransson. Somebody's going to have to correct me on that in the comments below. But anyway, so we get a lot of really great scores from this guy that don't feel like they're just John Williams scores. It feels like it's its own thing, while still kind of keeping that Star Wars-esque feel and familiarity that we've come to love over the years, from A New Hope to The Return of the Jedi to the prequels. Whether you hate them or like them, they still have really great scores and stuff. But even some of the music that we got in, like, the TV shows like Rebels, The Clone Wars, and Attack of the Clones, and a lot of other really great just shows and other expanded materials that we've gotten to work with. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to seeing some of the other scores come in and out. And the style that the show is kind of basing itself around feels very Star Wars, obviously, and a spaghetti western, like a Clint Eastwood almost world and surrealness to it. Kind of, we've expanded a lot with the Jedi and the Sith, and we've gotten to see a lot of Force sensitives and stuff like that, whereas a lot of the other materials that we have don't really get to come into a realistic media, as far as expanding on the extra stories of how the Empire had its vast just hold on the entire galaxy for so long, 20 plus years, easy. We just kind of saw firsthand what it was like for, people like Luke, Han, Leia, the cast that a lot of us really grew up and got to love and know so well. And then we just never get to see firsthand what it's like for the third parties. Whereas the Clone Wars is renowned and as spectacular as that TV show was, we also got to see more than just how the Jedi were affected. We got to see the clones, the other worlds, the battle between the Separatists, the clones, the Old Republic, and just everything that was there, and just had this overwhelming grasp. And it's really cool to see a lot more of the Star Wars universe that we get to see that's behind the scenes of, again, like the main heroes, the Jedi, versus the main well-known villains like the Sith and stuff. So I do think that with Jon Favreau's direction and writing and a lot of the cast that we are getting to work with and see, we do get to see a lot of just different, kind of daunting take on the Star Wars Western style to it, because it takes that aspect of the Mandalorians, which we don't have a whole lot of lore to them. Even in the Legends continuity, we do have a lot of really cool stuff, as far as like, they don't really take off their helmets, weapons are their religion, and I really do like how, the Mandalorian, played by Pedro Pascal, kind of, plays really well into that. And, we get to see snippets here and there, especially in episode 3 with some of the other Mandalorians and how they're affected as well. Their religion, their entire culture was virtually wiped out over the course of 20 plus years, and now 5 years post Empire, as this does take place in 9 ABY after Battle of Yavin for you Super Star Wars nerds out there. But as it takes place about roughly 5 years after the fall of the Empire, with the death of Palpatine, Vader, the heroes winning at the end of Return of the Jedi, we get to see the actual aftermath of what it would be like in a post-imperialistic world, where a lot of these people don't really get shown a lot in other film. We hear a lot about it in history, for example, post World War I and definitely post World War II, you just get to see a lot of these broken cities, these just families and people that have to kind of cope with trying to get back into, how their entire world was broken after an imperialistic rule, under Nazi Germany, the Ottoman Empire. Just so many giant empires over history have shown that a lot of these people don't really get their stories heard. It's more of like the front lines that we always get to hear about, the battles, the major bad guys in history and stuff. But what I really enjoy about this series, and again with the direction and the writing of Jon Favreau, is that he takes it into that aspect of what it's like for those characters. Yes, we mainly focus on the Mandalorian and soon to be everybody's hugely favorite. It's already 3 episodes in and we've already got tons of memes about Baby Yoda. I'm actually kind of excited to see where they go, because he's 50 years old, over 50, and he's just a baby. It's so cool, because Yoda lived to be like 900 some odd. I think it was exactly 900, but his species is just so mystical and stuff. But anyways, kind of back on topic. Like I said, we do mainly focus on the Mandalorian, and now coming with Baby Yoda and stuff. And it is the Mandalorian story. I mean, obviously the Mandalorian, but we just get to see again firsthand a lot of these broken people. Something as small as when he first completes his contract at the very beginning of episode 1, when he catches that kind of that fish sapien looking guy. I do love the aesthetics as well. A lot of the aesthetics that they bring to the table feel very old school Star Wars, while introducing a lot of the new stuff, because they kind of combine it with practical effects and VFX. That's actually kind of hard. Say that 5 times real fast, you'll get it real messed up. But they combine a lot of practical effects, with like the makeup, set prosthetics and stuff, as opposed to just putting it in the background of a big blue screen, like what they did with a lot of the prequel stuff, that it's very obvious, and with time it will tell it does not age very well, especially from 99. You go back and you watch The Phantom Menace, and it looks terrible. It's a personal guilty pleasure of mine. I kind of like that movie a lot, but it's not. It looks so bad. But with the VFX and the practical effects, it gives a different aesthetic to the Star Wars universe that, isn't big Hollywood budget, but it's also not, so small budget where they're just kind of working against the clock like what they had with the original stuff. They kind of mesh the two, and from my perspective, I definitely think it works, really well with just how a lot of these effects just kind of, again, mesh well together. It brings a whole new light to Star Wars that we're familiar with, but we're also getting a new introduction. And as well as the sets, I absolutely love the sets. With the kind of desert planet and the ice planet, it does feel reminiscent of Hoth and Tatooine, but there's just these outer rim planets. They haven't really specified that that's where they're at, but it's kind of where it's assumed to be at, because a lot of the Imperial forces, like the stormtroopers, Imperial officers and everything, after the fall of the Empire, kind of, dwindled. They had like little pocket rebellions to kind of fight for the last kind of powers and stuff. It was, really expanded upon in the Legends material, and now we're kind of getting more of it into this. I believe the book Aftermath, I'm trying to remember, Wedge Antilles was actually a huge character in that book series, and I got to get back into that. I read the first one like a while ago, and it's been a good minute, but I'd like to get back into it because it's a trilogy. But it shows, again, firsthand of how, some of these huge ace pilots, these war heroes, are affected after the war, like between the fall of the Empire and the rise of the First Order, because in the background, in those scenes, we do kind of get hints here and there that the remnants of the Empire came into the First Order. I mean, they're stormtroopers, they got the blasters, they got the giant Star Destroyers and stuff, and then they had Starkiller Base, which is a planet-sized Death Star. But a lot of this stuff we don't get to see so much, and that's why I really enjoy a lot of the new Star Wars continuity, for all of its mistakes that a lot of the new movies have had with fans, whether you hate them, whether you love them or not, there are some great things, like, giving some level of humanity to the stormtroopers, as opposed to making them just these faceless grunts like these video game bad guys, where you just kind of kill them and you just go about your day. They don't really have character development. But we get to see more of that in these new expanded materials, and especially The Mandalorian. We just see when he gets his private contract to go to this desert, Tatooine-esque world, and what I'm assuming many fans are also assuming this, but is the Outer Rim planets, and maybe even beyond that, because that's a lot of where the Imperialist forces go. But we just see this like a kind of I would say he kind of feels like a governor. Maybe he's kind of like some politician, but he's definitely a very high-tier former Imperial that just hands this contract out to the Mandalorian, and we don't know who he is, because he initially gets it from one of the 80s cool hero actors, Carl Weathers, who's actually really well known for doing his Predator role, that really badass scene that's kind of become a meme now, where they just like clap their hands together and just makes explosions and stuff, and it's sidetracked. But so the Mandalorian initially gets it from Carl Weathers, this character. There's just so many names with the new stuff. I'd have to go back. I'm so bad at memorizing like Star Wars names just because they're nuts. Like Ki-Adi-Mundi, you've got Plo Koon, just weird names, and a lot of them are really cool, but you just kind of forget some of them as well. But anyways, so he gets it from Carl Weathers, and then it takes him to this desert, Tatooine-esque planet, and, he doesn't ask many questions, and neither does the Mandalorian. But you can see in the background, he's guarded by what is very much assumed to be, just stormtroopers trying to make their way, just trying to make a living. We don't know what their case is at this point, but you can definitely tell their armor's rugged. They've definitely seen some combat beyond, the fall of the Empire. One of the last huge battles for any, last remnants was the Battle of Jakku, which is actually kind of expanded on in the first EA's Battlefront game. We get to learn a little bit of the lore there. I'd like to look more into it and, maybe get some more expansion into that. But, after that last huge battle, anybody that was left throughout the rest of the galaxy just kind of separated. And we get to see this in The Mandalorian. You just see these broken former Imperials that are now just kind of making their way. They're hiding. Because now with the New Republic coming into power and stuff, I'd assume that there'd be these manhunts, almost kind of like the Nazi hunts after, World War II, where a lot of people just kind of, they hid, and it just took decades upon decades to find them, and, they're still finding them today. It's nuts. But, that's kind of like what these stormtroopers are doing. They're just hiding, trying to make their way, because they didn't have much in the way of, knowing the going on behind the scenes of the Empire. They were the foot soldiers, they were the grunts, and then you had your hierarchy and stuff, but, that's what this kind of, like I said, he kind of reminds me like a politician, maybe a former high-ranking Imperial of some sort. I like to learn more about him if we can, but, he initially gives the mission to the Mandalorian, and it takes him off-world again, to another desert-esque world. And this time it's, just beyond any reach of anybody, so he makes it out there. And the first thing we see him do is actually run into Kuiil, an Ugnaught who's kind of, retired post-Empire. He just kind of does his own thing on the planet now. And he wants to help out the Mandalorian. And initially, he kind of makes it seem that he wants to do it for kind of money. It's just kind of that sense that you kind of get from him, because Ugnaughts are kind of dirty little pig grunt creature looking things, and because if we've seen him before, in Empire Strikes Back, I do believe parts of Return of the Jedi, but they're definitely seen in a lot of the expanded universe and stuff. But we get our first actual look at them in Empire Strikes Back in Cloud City, Bespin Cloud City. So when you see them, they're just kind of like these dirty little creatures that work on like mechanical rooms, droids. They're the ones that tore C3PO apart. But you just get a sense of this guy. He's different than your typical Ugnaught, and he's got this cool little phrase that he says every time, he just makes himself, he asserts his dominance and his wisdom, because he seems a little rugged around the edges, kind of that Clint Eastwood style character, that just kind of helps out the main antagonist, you just kind of get that old Western kind of guy. Kind of reminds me of Sam Elliott from the Ghost Rider with Nicolas Cage. He's this rugged old kind of guy. He's like, you're going to do what I say because I know these parts around here. And he just helps out the main character. But it's for the greater cause. He wants to just bring peace to his planet. And he initially, the Mandalorian initially just kind of pushes him off his side. He doesn't really want his help. And then, he realizes he's in somebody else's backyard. He doesn't know anything about this world, and that's typically, he's not supposed to. He's in hiding because their kind of religious ways, they're just kind of dying off after the Empire, because the Empire stole everything from them. Like their metal to make their armors, their weapons and stuff, because that's their entire religion is based around this stuff. But so the Mandalorian is always used to doing it his way, working on his own, and he's really good. I mean, they're just natural killers. But not in a sense like, like Sith or dark side users, or even just Imperials or anybody in general, even like the Separatists, they're not cold-blooded. They do it for a way that's, in their sense, religious. But anyways, the Kuiil, the Ugnaught, he's very adamant about helping him out, and his, like I was saying, his little catchphrase is like, I have spoken, and it's just really cool, and he's actually played by Nick Nolte, who I'm not too much of a fan of Nick Nolte, but he did really well as the Ugnaught. Nick Nolte just kind of pops up here and there in like random movies. I think the last time I remember him in a movie was like Ang Lee's 2003 Hulk movie, and I like that movie, but he was so bad in that. I think he was supposed to be the Absorbing Man or something, but anyways, that's the last time I remember seeing him in anything like big blockbuster-wise. And then when I was initially watching, I was like, I know this voice. Why do I know this voice? And, after I watched the first episode and the credits rolled, we find out that it's Nick Nolte, and I'm like, huh, okay. I actually like him in this role. But, so he starts, helping him out. And he ends up training him on this blurg thing. It's like this weird, giant, crawfish-looking monster thing with like these little tiny arms. And for my initial thing, if I remember in the EU, the Legends continuity, is like a vegetarian race, but they're kind of scattered throughout the galaxy. They're just on multiple planets and stuff. But the first one, he kind of like, the Mandalorian gets attacked by one, and he shoots its flamethrower at it, and then the other one just comes up and just tackles him, and he's trying to get these off. But that's when Kuiil comes in and just electrocutes him and just knocks them both out. And he's like, well, in order to get through the terrain of this planet, you gotta ride a blurg. If you don't know how to ride it, you're kind of screwed. And he's like, I'll find a way. And initially, he reluctantly just says, screw it, I kind of gotta do it. Do what's necessary to get the mission done. So eventually, he ends up, getting his training done, like in a quick, typical training montage. He ends up getting to where he needs to. And then he has a run-in with Jawas. And this is one of my favorite parts because, Jawas are kind of like junk raiders. They're kind of these gross little hooded creatures that are like X amount of feet tall, like 2-3 feet tall. And they got these big sand crawlers, and they're just like these little junk traders, and they steal stuff and, try to make a lot of money. And they were really popular in A New Hope, when they initially brought C-3PO and R2-D2 over. But we just kind of get this run-in with them, and it's kind of like a slapstick in a sense, but it's kind of like the Mandalorian's trying to deal with these natives, and he just doesn't know how to deal with them because they're really crafty and they're quick little buggers. But he finds them and they're tearing apart his ship, and he loads this like giant blaster axe looking thing. I'm sure there's a name for it, but it's like his main weapon. It's got these like little incinerator things. He just loads it like a shotgun. He takes aim and they just vaporize. It's cool. It's cool as all get. I absolutely loved it. So after his initial run-in with the Jawas, he ends up continuing on his way and stuff. So what wow. So once he actually gets his mission accomplished, he saves Baby Yoda, and he goes in and he ends up having to find a way to trade with these Jawas who just blew up his ship, and not blew it, but they stole parts from it. And so Nick Nolte, Kuil, the Ugnaught, comes in. He's like, well, you gotta trade with him. And he's like, are you kidding me? I gotta trade with these little crafty devils? Why? They stole my ship. It's my parts. I have to trade something to get my stuff back. And he's not very happy about that. But, again, he did accomplish the mission any way he needs be. So he ends up, saying, screw it, let's get this done. So then he ends up going to some weird cave thing and fighting a giant rhinoceros. And I guess the Jawas want like this weird rhino egg furry ball thing with like a bunch of yolk. They eat it. It's kind of gross. But initially, so he goes in, and this rhinoceros is just kicking his ass. He doesn't know what to do with it. It's just this big beast, and he just wasn't prepared for it, because usually he just prepares to take on a couple grunts, maybe a couple soldiers here and there and stuff, to accomplish his mission. Maybe other bounty hunters on the way, but by the end of the fight, his armor is completely, total, just trashed. And right before the rhino takes one last charge, you see in the background Baby Yoda just like, and it's really freaking cool because you get to see a Force sensitive, and he's just lifting the rhino. What we would see him as effortlessly, but once the rhino finally just drops down and takes one last charge, the Mando just ends up stabbing it, which was kind of weird because he struggled with it with his rifles and stuff, and then he just has this like little dinky dagger. He stabs it in the side one time and it just dies. I thought that was kind of weird, but so then the Mandalorian's like, he takes a look back, and the Baby Yoda just kind of like passed out from just the strain of just lifting such a massive creature. Rhinos are a couple tons. They're just big. They're huge. But he's just like, what was that? Because if you remember, back in A New Hope, at this point, the Force was just considered as some old religion that not a lot of people believed. And the prequels kind of ruined that mythos, that lore, because it's only like a 20-year span since the Jedi were wiped out, which you wouldn't forget something that massive in 20 years. But, if you harken back to that movie, the scene where Obi-Wan is talking with Han Solo and Chewie, Han Solo doesn't believe in the Force. He thinks it's just a bunch of hokey pokey, and he doesn't believe in it. And I really like that. It's kind of just a throwaway thing. You don't really think much about it, but if you honestly do, it's one of those things that most of the galaxy just forgot about the Jedi. It's convoluted, or is that much as that makes little sense in the continuity of things. It works really well because it harkens back to those old movies that try to keep that continuity as solid as possible, and I really like that because he doesn't know what's happening. And he even talks to Kuil, and the Ugnaught even kind of says, he's like, so explain to me what this is again? I'm kind of confused. And the Mandalorian just replies, I'm not so sure myself. And we got to think that these are people that haven't had interactions with Jedi for decades. They just, and people barely knew who Vader was. Like, they knew of him. They just knew him as the right hand of the Emperor, the kind of, the do-it-all guy, that go out and just, like, just destroy, like, little pocket rebellions of rebel soldiers and stuff. But before that, Vader was very much so well known for hunting down any last Jedi post Order 66. So any of the remnants of Jedi that weren't Force sensitive children, and that's a whole nother story, but he wiped them out. So most of the galaxy either forgot or just had no interaction with Jedi, so it just kind of faded into the background. It's just this old hokey religion from decades long since past. And that it really feels like they don't know. It feels like the Jedi are just gone. We know that Luke and Leia are still there, is Force sensitive. Luke's become a Jedi Knight at this point, training to become a Jedi Master. And over the next course of this 20 to 30 years, he creates a new Jedi Temple and all this, gets a whole new Jedi Order, Kylo Ren. We know what this stuff is. Force Awakens, and somewhat The Last Jedi kind of gives us teasers in that, but. So with this stuff, it just shows that these people don't have this connection. There's a huge disconnect from what the Force was, because that was the main driving point of the original trilogy, was the Force. There was the Jedi, there were the Sith. It was this classic good and evil, just, waging war against each other and just trying to, make everything fit and fix and balance it. Well, after the death of both the Palpatine and Vader, the only one that was really left was Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker, because Leia at this point, she was a Force sensitive, but she had very, very, very limited knowledge of what the Force was, if she even had any knowledge of it whatsoever. Because at this point, also Obi-Wan and Yoda, the last two great Jedi Masters from the pre-Empire, one was cut down by Vader, and then the other just died of old age. So any remnants of the Jedi Order of the old ways just kind of died off with them. Same with the Sith. It just died. And even Kylo Ren kind of mentions this. He's like, it all has to go, the Jedi, the Sith, all of it. We're going to do a whole new thing. And that's just how the galaxy was after Order 66 and after 20 plus years of Imperial rule under Palpatine and the Galactic Forces, So to see that in play with a third-party continuity, mixing it back in with first-party continuity, in the main Star Wars saga, the Skywalker saga, it's just really cool just to get this first-person perspective of these people that just, they don't know what this is, and they're curious, but that's stuff that I hope they expand on later in future episodes, and I'm sure they will. Again, we're only like 3 episodes in, but I genuinely hope that they can really bring this stuff in. And, once we get into like episode 3, they don't really do so much with the Jedi stuff, or, just the Force-sensitive Baby Yoda. They more look at the aspects of the Mandalorian, and this is where it gets really good. So, if you're not familiar with Legends continuity, pre-2012-ish, when Disney bought the Lucas Arts, just Lucasfilm entirely, the Star Wars brand, they just did away with the old continuity. So anything we knew about the Mandalorians, not canon, Jedi, Sith, any of the old stuff that was not the 6 main films, and anything that Disney had planned from then on, excluding the inclusion of Attack, or the Clone Wars TV show. I think that's one of the only things that started like 2005, 2006-ish, that is still considered modern canon, because it does expand, and they are coming out with a season 7 next year. I'm super stoked for that, by the way. But, in the Legends continuity, we still have very limited knowledge on what the Mandalorians were. We know more about them in Legends continuity than we do in the recent continuity, because in the recent continuity, they kind of expand on it very minimally in the Rebels show, and even less so in the Clone Wars. But with this, the show literally named The Mandalorian, we get more insight into what their religion is. And their religion is that they're a family. And if you don't know as well, one of the reasons in at least Legends continuity they didn't take off their helmets is because Mandalorians aren't a single race. They are multiple races of, aliens, hominids, just humanoid based creatures. You could be a Twi'lek and you could be a Mandalorian. You could be, oh god, whatever, Bosk, the bounty hunter. I can never remember what his lizard people are, but you could be anyone of any race, and you could be a Mandalorian. Just you are part of the family, and that's what makes you that, and that's what they expand upon. They have their qualms. They're still a family, and their weapons, their armor, their training, the way they kill, the way that they live, everything is based around that religion. And I guess kind of the commandant of the little pocket group of the Mandalorians that are on this little weird desert planet where he gets all of his contracts with the guild, from Carl Weathers, is there's a very small amount of them. I'd say maybe 30-40 of them, it looks like, at the final battle scene when the Mandalorian's getting away, with the Baby Yoda and stuff. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyway, so there's this commandant kind of lady who's kind of the leader, the head of the family, so to speak. It's kind of like it's almost like a matriarch-esque figure, and she's really cool. But we don't get to see much from her. She has very few speaking lines, but we get the sense that everybody in there really respects her, and you could just tell that she is the head honcho of this family almost, because she's wearing this like really cool, like kind of crimson chest plate, this armor. And, her helmet's just got this really cool Viking style to it, while also retaining that Mandalorian feel, and it looks really great. So again, the aesthetics, the props, just the practical effects that these guys do, just the lengths they went through just to make it not CGI based, or just entirely animated, and they could have easily done that, cheapened it up, made it an animated show or whatever, but they didn't. They went the extra mile, and these like little 30-45 minute segments that we get of the show really shows this, and it's epic beyond proportions. It's just so good. And I get a feel that we're going to get a lot more in depth into the Mandalorian, and I'm pretty sure later down the road, maybe 6 months to a year from now, we'll probably start seeing added books, maybe even like a Mandalorian text or something, maybe some comics and stuff from Marvel, because they're doing a lot of the the stuff with like Obi-Wan and Anakin adventures, the new Chewbacca stuff, Darth Vader, Palpatine. I even think they're doing stuff with Kylo Ren and Snoke. But they're just doing a lot of cool stuff, and they're bringing in the old continuity in a new light, and they're updating that, and I really think that's a great thing to do for a lot of newcomers for Star Wars, because there's just hundreds of books, thousands of comics, and just dozens upon dozens of games of just old continuity that unless you grew up with that, or unless you just familiarize yourself with that just to that extent, there's just not a lot that people have time to go through all that. And that's why I like a lot of the new stuff, because instead of just comics and books, and a lot of people still play video games, but comics, books, just like little text here and there, maybe snippets on Twitter and stuff that you get, that expands the lore. We get a lot more visual media than we ever have before. Like I said, the old continuity was mainly just novels and comics and stuff, and a lot of them were also RPGs like Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. We had the Force Unleashed 1 and 2. Some of the stuff was kind of expanded with the 501st Legion under Darth Vader in the original Battlefront games, 1, 2, and Renegade Squadron, I believe. It was a PSP title. But so we get a lot more stuff there, but there's just so much stuff to cover from old continuity. But with the new stuff, if you just want to enjoy the new stuff and become invested in the expanded canon, that's what The Mandalorian does. It can invest you there. Same with what the Clone Wars and Rebels do, is just bring these people into a light that they, can just generally enjoy, Saturday morning cartoons, but on a streaming service, and it's fantastic. But I think with that said, if there's any kind of like snippets here and there were a couple things that I'd probably like to cover in like a future video. This has gone on for about 30-35 minutes, but I think we're going to cut it off there. You know, for the first episode, we're covering, like I said, the first 3 episodes of The Mandalorian, or, you know, the general basis, the general gist of these. I definitely want to see more, and I hope they keep with this, you know, kind of spaghetti western style to it, you know, the Jon Favreau, again, writer-director is just doing, and I just hope they continue on this path, because for 3 episodes in, and only about an hour, hour and a half of content, it's really good. If you haven't gotten a chance to check it out yet, get yourself Disney Plus. It's a great streaming service, and you know, you just have a lot of fantastic content to come. And I can't wait to see what more Star Wars continuity and stuff we get expanded in the future. So again, guys, thanks for coming to the first ever episode of Press Play Reviews. I hope you had a great time. Have a popcorn, have a soda, press play for these reviews.